Okay, so you know how some things in history just grab you? Like some objects, they just have this aura? For me, one of those is definitely the Ark of the Covenant.
Ah, yeah, I see what you mean.
This legendary chest that we hear about in the Bible, like it's hugely significant, but where it is today, well, nobody knows. It's a total mystery.
It's a real head scratcher, that's for sure. And it's been that way for centuries. That mix of religious history, like ancient stuff and the unknown, it just draws people in. It's a great mystery.
Absolutely. And get this, what makes this deep dive even more interesting is that we found a declassified CIA document from 1988 just recently, and it talks about attempts to find the Ark.
No kidding.
Yeah. The methods they used, well, let's just say you might be surprised. We'll get to all that a little later. But just the fact that the CIA was even looking into this, it's kind of crazy, right?
It is, yeah. It makes you wonder what they thought they might find.
I know, right? So what we want to do in this deep dive is pretty simple. We're going to explore what the Ark of the Covenant actually is, figure out why it was so important back in the day, check out the main theories about where it could be now, and of course, dig into that CIA document and all its weirdness.
Sounds good.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. What exactly was this Ark of the Covenant?
Well, if we go by the Bible, mainly what it says in Exodus, the Ark of the Covenant was this sacred chest. But it wasn't just any old box. It was made specifically from acacia wood, which is really tough, and they found it in the Sinai Desert, so they clearly wanted it to last. And then, here's the kicker, it was totally covered in gold, inside and out.
Wow, so they spared no expense.
Nope. That gold tells us how much it meant to them, how sacred it was. They didn't just pick those materials randomly.
So yeah, not your typical storage container. Do we know how big this golden chest actually was?
Yeah, the Bible gives us rough dimensions using cubits, their old unit of measurement. It says something like 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and high. If we convert that, we're talking about 1.15 meters long, about 0.7 meters wide and high. It's a decent size, but you could still move it around.
Okay, so a pretty big golden box. And I've always been curious about the lid, the mercy seat. What was the deal with that?
The mercy seat, or sometimes they called it the propitiatorio, that was a big deal. It wasn't just a flat top. It was solid gold and decorated with these two golden cherubim.
I've seen pictures of them, like angels with wings.
Exactly. And they were facing each other, wings spread out, maybe even curving over the mercy seat. That was considered a super holy spot, like incredibly holy.
So what exactly did they keep inside this elaborate chest?
Its main purpose was to hold the tablets of the Ten Commandments, those stone tablets where God wrote the big rules for the Israelites. But there are traditions that say they might have put other important stuff in there too, like Aaron's rod, the one that magically blossomed, and a pot of manna, that bread-like food God sent down when they were wandering in the desert. So it held really important, like foundation-level stuff.
I see, like a container for their most sacred relics. Sounds like it was way more than just a place to keep things.
You got it. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a physical object. They saw it as God's earthly throne, like a real tangible symbol of God being with them. If it was around, it meant they had divine guidance and protection. First, they kept it in the Holy of Holies inside the tabernacle, their portable temple. Then later on, when they built Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, they put the Ark in its Holy of Holies, the innermost, most sacred part of the whole temple.
Okay, so we've got this crazy, important, gold-covered chest with basically God's word inside, and it's in their holiest places. Makes sense that it was a big deal. But I want to know more about how it played into their everyday life.
You mean its historical and religious significance?
Yeah, exactly. What specific role did it play in their history?
It was a central part of their identity, their relationship with God. Not just a passive symbol, it was a key player in a lot of their big moments.
Like what?
Well, think about the conquest of Jericho. The book of Joshua tells us they carried the ark around the city walls for 7 days straight. And on that last day, after the priests blew their trumpets and everyone shouted, bam, the walls just fell down, they believed the ark was directly involved in that victory.
That's a pretty powerful story. Makes you wonder what really happened there.
Right. And there were other times, too, the battles against the Philistines, for example. They sometimes brought the ark onto the battlefield thinking it would guarantee a win. But then there's that story about the Philistines actually capturing the ark. Yeah. And it said that led to a whole bunch of bad luck for them until they gave it back. And then you've got the story of Uzzah, who tried to steady the ark when the oxen pulling it stumbled. And let's just say it didn't end well for him.
That's a story that always stuck with me.
These stories show us how much respect and awe they had for the ark and how much power they believed it had.
Yeah, they definitely didn't mess around with it. Given all that history and religious weight, it's not surprising people are still looking for it. What exactly drives this search?
There are a few things. For Jewish and Christian believers, the Ark is the ultimate symbol of God's covenant with humanity. Finding it would be a huge religious event.
That makes sense.
Historically, it's a priceless artifact, something that could give us a unique window into early Israelite history and how monotheism developed. And then, of course, there are all the legends, the stories about its mystical powers, parting waters, punishing people, bringing victory. These stories have captured people's imaginations for a long time.
And let's not forget its impact on pop culture. You can't talk about the Ark without thinking about a certain movie with a whip and a fedora.
Totally. Raiders of the Lost Ark back in '81, that movie made the Ark mainstream. It became this iconic lost treasure with almost supernatural powers in everyone's mind.
Yeah, that movie had a huge impact. So it's a mix of deep religious importance, historical value, fascinating legends, and pop culture that keeps the search alive.
Exactly.
So the big question is, where could it be? We know it vanished from the historical record after the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem in 586 BCE and destroyed Solomon's temple. What are the main theories about its current location?
Well, ever since it disappeared, people have come up with tons of theories, some more believable than others. One of the most popular ones is that it's still in Jerusalem. The idea is that before the Babylonians invaded, they hid the Ark in some secret tunnels under the Temple Mount to protect it from Nebuchadnezzar's army.
That makes sense. Seems like a good hiding spot. Have they ever been able to check those tunnels out?
Unfortunately, no. There's no solid archaeological evidence to back up this theory, and as you can imagine, the Temple Mount is a very sensitive area, politically and religiously. It's almost impossible to get permission to excavate there and look for any hidden chambers that might hold the Ark.
Right, the politics make it really tricky. What about other theories? I've heard people say it might be in Africa.
You're probably thinking about the Ethiopian theory. They have this long-standing belief in Ethiopia that the Ark is actually in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. Their tradition says it was brought there by Menelik Account, the son of King Solomon, and the Queen of Sheba.
Wow, so it traveled quite a bit. Any evidence for that?
The main evidence is the tradition itself, which they've passed down for generations in Ethiopia. The church in Axum claims they have the Ark, and they say it's guarded by a specific monk who's the only person allowed to see it. However, and this is important, nobody else has been able to verify that. No outsider has seen the Ark there, so we can't really know for sure. It comes down to faith and their historical narrative.
So, not exactly hard proof. Okay, what other theories are out there?
Some people think it's on Mount Nebo, where Moses supposedly saw the promised land before he died. They think maybe the prophet Jeremiah hid it there before the Babylonians came.
Interesting. Anything to support that?
Not really. There's no specific archaeological evidence connecting the Ark to Mount Nebo. It's mainly based on how people interpret certain verses in the Bible, but there's no physical proof.
Okay. So we've got Jerusalem, Ethiopia, Mount Nebo. Anything else? Or are we getting into really far-fetched territory?
Well, there are other theories, some wilder than others. Some say it was taken to Babylon, even though there's no historical record of that. Others say it's hidden in caves in the Judean desert, like where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then you've got those out there ideas about it being moved to Europe or even America. But the problem with all these other theories is that there's no solid, verifiable evidence, just speculation.
It's like a giant historical puzzle with most of the pieces missing.
Okay, let's talk about that CIA document, the one that really caught my eye. We mentioned that the CIA was apparently interested in finding the Ark, which sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
What's the story with that document?
Here's where things get weird. This declassified CIA document is from December 5, 1988, and it wasn't released until 2000. It details a remote viewing session.
Remote viewing? Like what? Psychic stuff?
You got it. Remote viewing was this technique the CIA was looking into during the Cold War as part of Project Stargate.
Now, that sounds familiar. I think I've heard about that.
The goal of Project Stargate was to see if people could use their minds to see distant places or objects, maybe gather intel without actually going there.
So the CIA was seriously considering psychic abilities for intelligence gathering. And one of the things they tried it on was the Ark of the Covenant.
That's amazing.
Pretty wild, right? It shows you how they were thinking back then, how they were open to some pretty unorthodox methods. The document says they gave a remote viewer called Remote Viewer #32 a code 78141010121 to represent the Ark of the Covenant. They called it Training Target 30209, But these weren't geographical coordinates, okay? They were just a way to focus the viewer's attention without giving them any real clues.
So they gave the psychic a code and basically said, okay, focus on this and tell us what you see. What kind of impressions did they get? What did they see?
According to the document, the viewer described the ark as this container, sort of coffin-shaped, made of wood, gold, and silver. They also said it was decorated with seraphim, which lines up with those descriptions of cherubim on the mercy seat in the Bible. Interestingly, the viewer also saw another container inside the bigger one.
Sounds a little like those historical descriptions. But did they say where it was? Did they pinpoint a location?
This is where things get fuzzy. The viewer said it was somewhere in the Middle East. That was their impression. They sensed it was underground, dark and damp, and they mentioned people speaking Arabic and buildings with mosque domes. But that's about as specific as they got.
Somewhere in the Middle East is a pretty huge area. Did they pick up on any other details, like anything about its surroundings or how it was being protected?
Yeah, there were a couple of other interesting tidbits. The viewer sensed that the ark was being guarded by some beings or entities, and that only certain people could open it at a specific time. They also had this strong feeling that if anyone unauthorized tried to open it, they'd be destroyed by some unknown power. It's a bit dramatic, and it echoes some of those old legends about the ark being dangerous to handle.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. But we have to remember that remote viewing itself is, well, it's not exactly scientifically proven, right?
All right. Most experts in archaeology and history don't consider remote viewing a reliable way to find lost artifacts. There's just no consistent, verifiable evidence that it actually works.
And didn't someone point out that a certain movie might have influenced the viewer?
Absolutely. Some analyses, including ones that talk about the impact of Raiders of the Lost Ark coming out in '81, just 7 years before this remote viewing session, they say there's a good chance of cultural influence. The images and ideas from the movie, that coffin-like ark with dangerous powers, it might have subconsciously affected what the viewer saw and how they described it. The similarities are pretty interesting to think about.
So we have the CIA document. It's super fascinating. It shows us how the CIA was willing to try some pretty unconventional methods during the Cold War, which is a big deal in itself. But it doesn't really give us any solid clues about where the ark actually is.
Exactly. It's more of a historical curiosity than anything else. It shows us how far intelligence agencies were willing to go in their investigations. But because of how unreliable remote viewing is and the vague information they got, it's not really evidence.
Okay, so in this deep dive, we've explored the ark's origins in the Bible, its huge historical and religious importance, the mystery of its disappearance, all those theories about where it might be, from hidden tunnels in Jerusalem to Ethiopia. And then we went down this rabbit hole of CIA psychic investigations.
Quite the journey.
It is. And the craziest part is the mystery is still unsolved. The Ark of the Covenant is still out there somewhere, making people wonder and speculate.
It really captures the imagination.
It does. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Right.
Could there be some link, even a small one, between those ancient beliefs about the Ark's power and what the remote viewer said about it being protected? Or, maybe a more realistic question, how much has our fascination with the Ark, especially with all the stories and movies about it, how much has that influenced not only the CIA's investigation, but also the minds of those who thought they could find it using psychic powers? It makes you think about how faith, history, and our human need to uncover the unknown, how they all intertwine.
It's a great point. The Ark of the Covenant isn't just a lost artifact. It's a symbol of all those enduring mysteries that still fascinate us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into this with you.
Likewise. Until next time, everyone, keep those theories coming.